The pain in Rachel's head felt like someone had buried an axe in her skull. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting to see the gray ceiling of the medical bay. Instead, she saw scales. Dark purple scales that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. The scales belonged to something massive sitting beside her bed. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. Every muscle screamed in protest. The massive creature shifted, and Rachel realized it was watching her with eyes that glowed like amber in firelight. A Drachnir, one of the dragon people who had lived on this planet long before humans arrived. But not just any Drachnir. This was Elder Grandmother Ashwing, the oldest and most important leader of the entire clan. Rachel had only seen her once before, during the initial treaty signing 15 years ago when the colony first landed. What was she doing here? A small device on the table beside Rachel's bed crackled to life. The translator. Ashwing's deep rumbling voice came through in crisp English words. "You wake at last, small one. 3 days you have slept." 3 days, Rachel's mind raced, trying to remember. She had been in the eastern caves taking rock samples. The readings had shown promising mineral deposits. Then the ceiling had started to crack. She remembered running. Then nothing. "The collapse," Rachel whispered. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Did anyone else get hurt?" Ashwing made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a hum and a growl. "Only you were in the deep tunnels. Your people pulled you from the rocks. You were fortunate. The mountain was not ready to claim you yet." Rachel noticed something strange then. The elder was alone. No attendants, no guards, no other Drachnir. In all the cultural briefings Rachel had attended, she had learned that elders never traveled without their retinue. They certainly never visited human facilities alone. "Why are you here?" Rachel asked, then quickly added, "I mean no disrespect, Elder, I am honored, but I do not understand." Ashwing stood, her full height making the medical bay seem suddenly very small. She moved to the door and touched it with one massive claw. The door slid open. What Rachel saw in the next room made no sense at all. 4 small dragons, each about the size of a large dog, were curled together on the floor. Their scales ranged from deep red to black to a pale pink that was almost white. When the door opened, all 4 heads snapped up. They stared at Rachel with wide eyes. Then chaos erupted. The small dragons scrambled over each other, rushing toward the door. Medical staff tried to block them, but the cubs were too fast. They tumbled into Rachel's room in a mass of wings and tails and excited chirping sounds. Before Rachel could react, they were climbing onto her bed. The smallest one, with pink-tinged scales, climbed directly onto Rachel's chest and pressed her face against Rachel's neck. The others arranged themselves around her, their tails intertwining. One of them, dark as obsidian, simply stared at Rachel with unsettling intelligence. Another, bright red, kept making small, happy sounds. The fourth, gray and brown like river stones, pressed against Rachel's side. "What is this?" Rachel asked, afraid to move and disturb them. Ashwing dismissed the medical staff with a gesture. When the door closed and they were alone again, she spoke. 4 days ago, there was a rockslide in the Northern Territories. 2 adult Drachnir were caught in the fall. They did not survive. These are their young, orphans now. Rachel's heart clenched. She knew what it was to lose family. Her own younger brother and sister had died in a transport accident on Earth 3 years ago. It was why she had come to this distant planet, to escape the memories. "I am sorry for your loss," Rachel said softly, "but I still do not understand why they are here. When you were brought to this place, unconscious and broken, we sent word to our people as courtesy. The cubs had just been found. They were with the clan mothers grieving, but something called to them. They left the settlement and came here, to you." The small pink one, still pressed against Rachel's neck, made a tiny sound that seemed unbearably sad. "They would not leave," Ashwing continued. For 3 days, these young ones have stayed in that room, watching you through the glass. When anyone tried to take them away, they fought. They refused food. They refused comfort. They only wanted to be near you." Rachel looked down at the 4 small dragons on her bed. The red one had fallen asleep, its small chest rising and falling. The gray one was watching her with hopeful eyes. "In our culture, this is called the heart choosing," Ashwing said. "It is rare. It has not happened in 7 generations. The young ones, in their grief and loss, have looked into your spirit and chosen you as their clutch mother." "But I am human," Rachel protested. "I know nothing about raising dragons. I cannot fly. I cannot breathe fire. I do not even speak your language properly." "None of this matters to the young. They have chosen. The question now is whether you will accept." Rachel wanted to say no. She had come here to be alone, to avoid connections that could hurt her again. She had built walls around her heart for good reason. But the small pink one, the smallest of them all, looked up at Rachel with eyes that held the same pain Rachel saw in her mirror every morning. The pain of losing everything and not knowing how to go on. "What happens if I refuse?" Rachel asked quietly. Ashwing's voice was gentle. "They have lost parents once. To lose a chosen mother as well when their hearts are already broken, few young ones survive such grief. Their spirits fade. They stop eating. They stop wanting to live." Rachel closed her eyes. She thought about her brother and sister, about how she would have given anything for someone to care, to stay, to choose not to leave her alone in her pain. She opened her eyes and looked at each of the 4 cubs. The red one bold even in sleep. The gray one quiet and watchful. The black one intelligent and calm. The tiny pink one fragile and afraid. "What are their names?" Rachel asked. Ashwing's eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval. "They are called Cinder, Flint, Obsidian, and Ruby." Rachel took a deep breath. Her life was about to change in ways she could not imagine. But looking at these 4 orphaned souls, she realized she had already made her choice the moment she asked their names. "Then I accept," Rachel whispered. "I will try to be what they need." Ruby, the smallest, made a sound like a purr and fell asleep on Rachel's chest. The others settled in closer. And for the first time in 3 years, Rachel Winters felt something other than emptiness in her heart. She felt terrified, but she also felt needed, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start. 2 weeks had passed since Rachel left the medical bay. She now lived in a strange dwelling that sat between 2 worlds. On one side, the human colony spread out with its metal buildings and machinery. On the other side, the Draknir settlement rose from the cliffs, all stone and fire and ancient tradition. Her new home was neither human nor Draknir. It was something in between, built quickly by both species working together. The walls were stone like the Draknir preferred, but the roof was human metal that would not burn when the cubs started breathing fire. There were human lights and computers, but also raised platforms where dragons could perch and rest. Rachel had never been so exhausted in her life. "Cinder, no," she shouted as the red cub opened his mouth and tried to produce flame. What came out instead was a sad little puff of smoke and a lot of coughing, but the heat had been real enough to singe the edge of Rachel's jacket. Cinder looked proud of himself. Flint immediately tried to copy his brother, with similar smoky results. Rachel grabbed a fire blanket from the wall, just in case. The colony had given her a dozen of them, along with a handbook on dragon young that was clearly written by someone who had never actually met a dragon cub. Obsidian watched his siblings' attempts with calm interest but did not try himself. He was always like that, thinking before acting. Ruby, meanwhile, had found a shiny piece of metal from one of Rachel's old tools and was trying to hide it under the sleeping platform. "Ruby, I can see you," Rachel said tiredly. "You are not as sneaky as you think." Ruby made a chirping sound that the translator bracelet interpreted as innocent confusion, but Rachel knew better. In just 2 weeks, she had learned that Ruby was small but clever, and very good at looking innocent when caught doing something wrong. There was a knock at the door. Rachel opened it to find her friend Diana Harris, arms loaded with supplies. "Brought you some things from the colony," Diana said, stepping inside. She looked around at the chaos, scorch marks on the walls, shiny rocks piled in corners, claw marks on almost every surface. "How are you holding up?" "I have not slept more than 3 hours straight since I brought them home," Rachel admitted. "They take turns waking up. When one settles, another decides it is time to play or eat or knock things over." Diana set down her bags and pulled out containers of food. Real human food, not the protein bars Rachel had been surviving on. "The governor wanted me to check on you. Make sure you are okay." "Governor Wells is worried I will quit and cause a diplomatic incident," Rachel said flatly. "Can you blame him? The Dracnir control access to half the mineral deposits on this planet. If you walk away from those cubs, who knows how they will react?" Rachel felt a flash of anger. "Is that what everyone thinks, that I am doing this for politics?" Diana held up her hands. "I did not say that. I know you better. But Rachel, some people in the colony are talking. They do not understand why you gave up your job, your life, everything, for alien children." Before Rachel could respond, Obsidian moved between her and Diana. Not threatening, just present, watching, protecting. Diana's eyes widened. "Does he understand what we are saying?" "I think he understands more than any of us realize," Rachel said softly, placing a hand on Obsidian's dark scales. "They all do." After Diana left, Rachel sat on the floor with the cubs around her. Elder Ashwing had visited that morning with more instructions. In 2 weeks, there would be a ceremony. The clan council would test whether Rachel was fit to continue as clutch mother. She had to prove 3 things: provision, protection, and passage. Rachel understood provision. She had to show she could feed and care for them. Protection meant keeping them safe, but passage was still a mystery. Ashwing had only said, "You will understand when the time comes." That night, Rachel made a mistake. She needed to go to the colony for supplies that Diana had not brought. She thought she could slip away while the cubs were sleeping. She was wrong. She was halfway to the colony when she heard the sound. 4 sets of wings, still small and awkward, beating frantically. The cubs had followed her, in the dark, across dangerous terrain. Ruby, the smallest, was struggling. Her wings were not as strong as her siblings. She was falling behind, making distressed sounds. Rachel ran back, her heart pounding. If Ruby fell, if she got hurt because Rachel had tried to sneak away. Cinder had already dropped back, flying beneath his sister, letting her rest on his back when she needed to. Flint circled above, calling out encouragement. Obsidian flew beside Rachel, matching her pace on the ground. When they all made it safely back to the dwelling, Rachel sat down hard and pulled all 4 cubs close. "I am sorry," she said. "I thought I could leave you for a little while. I was wrong. I understand now. You are not pets I can leave behind. You are my responsibility every moment." Ruby pressed against her, exhausted from the flight. Cinder curled up on her lap. Flint rested his head on her shoulder. Obsidian simply watched her with those knowing eyes. Rachel realized something then. She had been thinking of this as a burden, a duty. But these 4 small dragons had crossed dangerous territory in the dark, risking themselves just to stay with her. That was not duty. That was love. The next day, Rachel went to the colony with all 4 cubs walking beside her. People stared. Some looked afraid. One engineer, a man named Foster Bryant who had never liked the Dracnir, made a loud comment about Rachel being a traitor to her own species. Cinder heard it, felt Rachel's hurt. The cub positioned himself between Rachel and Foster, wings spread, a low growl in his throat. Rachel quickly stepped forward, placing herself between Cinder and Foster. "It is okay," she told the cub. "He is just scared. Fear makes people say mean things." She looked at Foster. "We are not enemies. We are all just trying to survive on this planet together." Foster walked away without answering, but Rachel saw something in his eyes. Not anger, something worse: resentment. That night, as Rachel finally fell asleep with 4 warm bodies pressed against her, she dreamed of flying. In the dream, she was not falling. She was soaring with 4 young dragons flying beside her, and she was not afraid at all. She woke to find Ruby watching her, those pink-tinged scales catching the moonlight through the window. "Cannot sleep either," Rachel whispered. Ruby made a soft sound and settled closer. Rachel closed her eyes again. In 2 weeks she would face the clan council. She had no idea if she would pass their test, but looking at her 4 cubs, she knew one thing for certain. She would try with everything she had, because they had chosen her, and she had chosen them back. The emergency alarm woke Rachel before dawn. She sat up fast, careful not to disturb Ruby, who was sleeping across her legs. The sound was coming from her old communicator, the one she had kept from her days as a surveyor. It was Diana. "Rachel, we need help. A cargo ship crashed in the northern mountains. Medical supplies, food, everything we need for the next 6 months. The pilot is still alive but injured. The terrain is too dangerous for our vehicles." Rachel was already pulling on boots. "How long does the pilot have?" "Unknown, but there are 50 people in the colony who need the medicine that ship was carrying. Without it, some of them will die, including children." The cubs were awake now, sensing Rachel's urgency. They gathered around her, eyes bright in the dim light. "The northern mountains are Draknir territory," Rachel said slowly. "You need them to help." The governor tried. "They said it violates the non-interference treaty. We settle our own problems, they settle theirs. Those were the rules we agreed to." Rachel closed her eyes. She understood why the Draknir refused. Humans had insisted on that treaty, wanting independence. Now that same independence might kill people. "I will try," Rachel said, "but I cannot promise anything." She ended the call and looked at her cubs. Cinder was already moving toward the door. Flint and Obsidian were watching her, waiting. Ruby, always the most sensitive, was making worried sounds. "I know," Rachel told them. "This is not our problem to solve, but people will die if we do nothing. Is that the kind of family we want to be?" Obsidian moved first. He took Rachel's sleeve gently in his teeth and pulled her toward the settlement. The others followed. The clan council met in a great stone chamber carved into the mountainside. Rachel had only been here once before, when Ashwing had first presented her to the other elders. She had never brought the cubs to a council meeting. Young ones were not permitted. But the cubs walked through the entrance with her, and no one stopped them. Elder Ashwing sat at the center of the council circle. Around her were 12 other elders, including Steelclaw, a fierce warrior who had never hidden his distrust of humans. His scales were scarred from countless battles, and his eyes were hard. Rachel bowed in the way Ashwing had taught her. The cubs did the same, copying her movements. "Forgive the interruption, honored elders," Rachel said. The translator on her wrist turned her words into the Draknir language. "I come to ask for help on behalf of the human colony." Steelclaw's laugh was harsh. "The treaty is clear, human. We do not interfere in your affairs. You wanted independence, you have it." Rachel had prepared arguments. She had planned to talk about diplomacy, about building trust, about future cooperation. But standing there with her cubs beside her, all those careful words felt wrong. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "You are right. The treaty says you do not have to help us, but I am not here to talk about treaties or politics. I am here to talk about what I have learned from these 4. She gestured to her cubs. "Cinder has taught me that being brave means acting even when you are afraid. Flint has shown me that strength is not always loud or obvious. Obsidian reminds me every day that wisdom means thinking before speaking. And Ruby, small as she is, proves that size does not determine courage." The cubs stood taller at their names. Ruby made a small chirping sound. But the most important thing they have taught me is this: family is not about blood. It is not about species. It is about who you choose to protect, who you choose to stand with when things are hard. Rachel met Steelclaw's eyes. A pilot is dying in the mountains. Children in the colony need medicine. They are not my blood. Some of them are not even my friends. But they are people who need help, and I cannot help them alone. Silence filled the chamber. Rachel could hear her own heartbeat. She had failed. She had broken protocol, brought cubs to a council meeting, and asked for something the treaty said she could not have. Then Obsidian did something no one expected. He stepped forward and released a clear, ringing call. It was a sound Rachel had never heard before, high and pure and full of something that felt like a promise. Ashwing's eyes widened. Around the chamber, the other elders stirred. Impossible, Steelclaw breathed. That is the pledge call. Young ones do not learn that for years. He speaks for his clutch, Ashwing said softly. The young one offers his pledge in support of his mother's words. Flint and Cinder added their voices, their calls less refined but just as sincere. Ruby, though her voice was smaller, sang out with all her strength. Steelclaw stood. For a long moment he stared at Rachel and her cubs. Then he bowed his head, not to Rachel but to the 4 young dragons who had pledged themselves. The young ones have spoken, he said. We fly at dawn. The rescue happened fast. Rachel rode on Ashwing's back, her first time flying with a Dracnir. The wind was cold and fierce, but the elder's scales were warm beneath her. Below, she could see Steelclaw and 6 other warriors searching the mountains. The cubs had wanted to come, but Ashwing had forbidden it. They were too young for such dangerous flying. Rachel had left them with Diana at the colony, though all 4 had protested loudly. They found the crashed ship wedged between 2 cliffs. The pilot, a young woman named Amy Rodriguez, was conscious but trapped. Her leg was crushed under debris. Steelclaw and the other warriors worked with frightening efficiency. They used their strength to lift metal that human machinery could not move. They rigged harnesses with rope and careful claws. Within 2 hours, Amy was free, and the critical medical supplies were secured. The flight back was slower, more careful. Amy was strapped to a carrying harness between 2 warriors, drugged for pain but alive. Rachel held tight to Ashwing, watching the sun rise over the mountains. When they landed at the colony, Governor Wells was waiting with the medical team. He thanked the Dracnir formally, using the proper words of deep gratitude that Ashwing had taught Rachel weeks ago. But Foster Bryant was there too, with a group of other colonists. They did not look grateful, they looked angry. This sets a dangerous precedent, Foster said loudly. Now they will expect payment for this. They will demand things in return. Steelclaw turned to face him. The warrior was twice Foster's size, all muscle and scales, and barely contained power. We demand nothing, Steelclaw said. We helped because the young ones asked, because a mother stood before the council and spoke of family. If you see that as weakness or debt, then you understand nothing. He spread his wings and took flight, the other warriors following. Only Ashwing remained for a moment. Your test comes in 1 week, she told Rachel. The council will be watching. Then she too was gone, leaving Rachel standing between 2 groups. The colony colonists who thought she had made things complicated, and Diana, who was smiling. You did it, Diana said quietly. You actually did it. Rachel was not sure what she had done. She had asked for help and received it, but she had also seen the look in Foster's eyes, the resentment, the fear of change. She went back to her dwelling to find her cubs waiting at the door. They mobbed her, climbing and chirping and demanding to know everything. Rachel told them about the flight, about the rescue, about Amy who was safe in the medical bay. That night, as she settled to sleep with 4 warm bodies around her, Rachel thought about Steelclaw's words. The young ones had spoken. They had pledged themselves in front of the council. Her bobbies were growing up, and Rachel realized that passing the council's test was no longer her biggest worry. Her biggest worry was the growing divide between humans who wanted to build something new and humans who wanted to keep things the way they had always been. A divide that was about to get much worse. Rachel stood at the edge of the ceremonial cliff and tried not to look down. The drop was at least 300 meters, straight down to jagged rocks and rushing water. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Her hands were shaking. 3 months had passed since the rescue. The cubs had grown so much that Rachel sometimes forgot they had ever been small enough to sleep on her chest. Cinder was almost as tall as her waist now. Flint was the largest, built strong and solid. Obsidian remained lean but quick. Ruby, still the smallest, had developed a fierce determination that seemed to double her actual size. Today was their first flight, and somehow, impossibly, Rachel was expected to jump off this cliff with them. Ashwing had explained it the night before. The old way of teaching flight, before Draknir had built their cliff settlements, involved parents launching their young from their backs while in flight. The young ones would spread their wings by instinct, and the parent would catch them if they failed. But Rachel had no wings, no way to catch anyone. She was terrified of heights, something she had successfully hidden for years by staying away from edges and high places. Now she stood at the highest point in the region, expected to throw herself into empty air with 4 young dragons who had never flown before. Around them, the entire clan had gathered. Other young Draknir, slightly older than her cubs, had already completed their first flights. Rachel had watched them leap with their parents, spreading wings that caught the air like sails. It had been beautiful, terrifying but beautiful. "You ready?" Diana called from the safe area behind the cliff. She had come to watch, along with what seemed like half the colony. Word had spread that the human clutch mother was attempting the impossible. Rachel was not ready. She would never be ready. But her cubs were watching her with trusting eyes, waiting for her to lead them. Cinder walked to the edge first. He looked back at Rachel, wings half spread, eager to prove himself. But he did not jump. He was waiting. Flint joined his brother, solid and steady. Then Obsidian, calm as always but with excitement bright in his dark eyes. Finally Ruby, who was trembling but walked to the edge on legs that did not buckle. They were all waiting for her. Rachel thought about running, about calling this off, about explaining that she was just a human, that this was insane, that there had to be another way. But there was no other way. This was passage. This was the test Ashwing had warned her about. A clutch mother must leap with her young, trusting the clan to catch her, proving she had faith in the community raising her cubs. Rachel walked to the edge. She took Cinder's foreleg in one hand, Ruby's in the other. Flint and Obsidian pressed against her sides, their scales warm against her arms. "Together," Rachel whispered, her voice was shaking. "We do this together." Cinder looked at her with absolute trust. Ruby made a tiny sound that might have been fear or excitement or both. Obsidian touched his nose to her shoulder. Flint rumbled deep in his chest, a sound Rachel had learned meant comfort. Rachel looked down. The world spun. Her stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed at her to step back to save herself. But her cubs were not moving without her. They had walked to this edge because she had walked to it. They were willing to jump because she was there. So Rachel jumped. The fall lasted forever. The wind roared in her ears. The ground rushed up at impossible speed. Rachel heard herself scream, but the sound was lost in the howling air. Then she felt it, 4 sets of wings snapping open around her. The cubs' instincts had taken over the moment they left the cliff. Cinder's wings caught the air with a crack like thunder. Flint dropped slightly, then rose on a thermal current. Obsidian's flight was smooth, calculated, perfect. Ruby struggled, her smaller wings working twice as hard, but she was flying. They were all flying. Rachel was still falling. She saw Steelclaw swooping toward her, his massive form blocking out the sun. He caught her on his broad back with practiced ease, his flight barely wavering under her weight. From Steelclaw's back, Rachel watched her cubs take their first real flight. Cinder was doing barrel rolls, showing off. Flint flew in wide, steady circles, getting a feel for the air. Obsidian tested different wing positions, learning what worked best. Ruby was falling. Rachel's heart stopped. Ruby's wings were spread, but she was too small, too light. A gust of wind had caught her wrong and she was tumbling, unable to correct. Rachel opened her mouth to scream, but Cinder was already moving. He folded his wings and dove, faster than Rachel had ever seen him move. He swooped beneath his sister, spreading his wings at the last second to create an updraft. Ruby caught it, righted herself, and landed on Cinder's back. Brother and sister flew together for several moments while Ruby caught her breath. Then Ruby pushed off and spread her wings again, this time catching the air correctly. She wobbled, but she flew, and Cinder stayed close beneath her, ready to catch her if she fell again. Rachel felt tears on her face. Her cubs were not just flying, they were protecting each other. When they finally landed, the entire clan roared their approval. The sound echoed off the mountains, huge and primal and full of joy. Rachel slid off Steelclaw's back on legs that barely held her weight. Ashwing walked forward, her ancient eyes gleaming. She placed one massive claw on Rachel's shoulder. "The human has passed through fire," Ashwing announced in a voice that carried to every gathered Dracnir and human. "She jumped into air without wings. She trusted us to catch her. She trusted her young to fly. She is Clutch Mother, recognized by tradition and by heart. The cubs are hers. She is ours." The cubs mobbed Rachel, all talking at once through their translator collars, telling her about the wind and the sky and how Cinder had saved Ruby and how amazing it all was. Rachel hugged them all, not caring that their scales were scratching her arms or that their excited wing flaps kept hitting her in the face. That night, Diana brought contraband chocolate from Earth, something that cost a fortune to ship across the stars. They sat outside Rachel's dwelling, watching the cubs practice short flights in the safe valley. "Half the colony thinks you have lost your mind," Diana said. "The other half thinks you are some kind of hero. Foster and his group are getting louder about wanting to renegotiate the treaty. They think the Dracnir owe us now." Rachel ate a piece of chocolate, savoring the taste of home. "What do you think?" Diana watched Ruby execute a clumsy landing, tumbling tail over wings, then get up and immediately try again. "I think you jumped off a cliff without wings because 4 alien children needed you to. I think that is either the bravest or craziest thing I have ever seen. Maybe both." "I was terrified," Rachel admitted. "I am still terrified. Every day I wake up and think, what am I doing? How can I possibly be what they need?" "But you keep doing it anyway." Rachel nodded. "Because they need me, and I need them. I did not know how empty I was until they filled that space." Cinder flew overhead, calling down to them. "Show off." Flint and Obsidian were practicing synchronized turns. Ruby was taking a break, curled up on a warm rock. "Things are going to change," Diana said quietly. "The rescue changed how people see the Dracnir. Your test today changed how the Dracnir see humans. Foster and his group will not like that." Rachel knew Diana was right. But tonight, she did not want to think about politics or treaties or angry colonists. Tonight, she just wanted to watch her bobbies fly. The discovery happened 6 months after the first flight. A survey team found platinum and iridium deep in the northern mountains, the kind of deposit that could make the colony rich, the kind of deposit that Earth would actually care about. Rachel was teaching Ruby how to hunt small rock lizards when Diana came running to her dwelling. The look on her friend's face told Rachel something was very wrong. "It is in the burial grounds," Diana said, breathing hard. "The deposit. It is right in the middle of where the Dracnir bury their dead." Rachel felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. The burial grounds were sacred. Humans had agreed never to go there. It was in the original treaty, written in both human and Draknir languages, signed by both peoples. Governor Wells wants you to ask the Draknir for permission to mine it, Diana continued. He thinks because of you and the cubs, they might agree. No, Rachel said immediately. I will not do that. I am not a diplomat. I am not a bargaining chip. Rachel, the colony is dying, you know that. Earth will not send supplies unless we show profit. Without that deposit, we have maybe 1 year before they cut us off completely. People will have to leave or starve. The cubs had stopped playing and were watching the conversation. Obsidian moved closer to Rachel, sensing her distress. Then we find another deposit, Rachel said. We ask the Draknir if there is other land we can use, but I will not ask them to let us dig up their ancestors' graves for money. Diana left unhappy. Rachel tried to go back to teaching Ruby, but her heart was not in it. She knew what was coming. Wells would ask her officially. Pressure would build, and she would have to choose between her own species and her adopted family. She was right. Wells came that evening looking tired and desperate. I am not asking you to betray anyone, he said. Just talk to them, explain our situation. Maybe there is a compromise. Rachel agreed, though every instinct screamed at her not to. Maybe there was a way. Maybe the Draknir would understand. She was wrong. Ashwing's reaction was cold fury. The elder did not yell. She did not threaten. She simply said, we gave humans space to live. We shared our world. We helped when your people were in danger. And now you want to disturb the rest of our ancestors for profit. It is not my choice, Rachel protested. I am just delivering the message. You chose to bring it here, Ashwing said. You chose to stand before me and ask this thing. The elder turned away. You are not welcome in the settlement until you decide where your loyalty truly lies. Rachel walked home with tears streaming down her face. The cubs followed in silence, knowing better than to chirp or play. For the first time since they had chosen her, Rachel was banned from the Draknir settlement. 2 days later, Foster Bryant made everything worse. Rachel heard the explosions from her dwelling. She ran outside to see smoke rising from the northern mountains. The cubs took flight immediately, heading toward the sound. Rachel followed on foot, her heart pounding. She found Foster and 5 other colonists at the edge of the burial grounds. They had brought drilling equipment. They had set small charges to test the rock composition. They claimed they were just taking samples from outside the sacred zone. But the Draknir did not see it that way. Steelclaw arrived with 12 warriors, all armed, all furious. The colonists had weapons too. Not much, but enough to kill if this went bad. You violate the treaty, Steelclaw roared. You bring your machines to sacred ground. We are outside the boundary, Foster shouted back. We checked the maps. This is legal. The boundary is where we say it is, another warrior snarled. Your maps mean nothing. Rachel pushed through the gathered crowd. Her cubs were already there, positioned between the 2 groups with wings spread wide. They were bigger now, almost full-grown, and they looked fierce. Stop, Rachel screamed. Everyone stop. The noise died down. Both sides turned to look at her. Rachel's mind raced. She could see weapons ready on both sides. One wrong move and people would die. Her cubs would be caught in the middle. She turned to Foster. You need to leave now. We have every right to be here, Foster said. The treaty says. I do not care what the treaty says, Rachel interrupted. You are about to start a war over a survey. Is that worth it? She turned to Steelclaw. And you are ready to kill humans because they took rock samples. Are we worth so little to you? Steelclaw's eyes blazed. They disrespect our dead. They are desperate, Rachel said. Our people are dying. Not today, not tomorrow, but slowly. The colony cannot survive without resources, without support from Earth, and Earth will not help unless we find something valuable. She stood between the 2 groups, her cubs beside her. So here is what is going to happen. Foster, you and your people will leave. You will not come back here, ever. You cannot order me, Foster began. I just did, Rachel said. You want this deposit so badly, you want to risk everything we have built with the Dracnir, but I am telling you it is not worth the cost. She turned to Steelclaw. And you need to listen. Humans are not trying to insult you. We are trying to survive. If you want us to stay off this land, then help us find another way. Because if this colony fails, Earth will send others, and they will not care about treaties or sacred ground or making friends. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Obsidian did something extraordinary. He walked to Steelclaw and bowed his head, the same gesture of respect the cubs had learned for elders. Then he walked to Foster and did the same thing. The other cubs followed their brother, 4 young dragons, showing respect to both sides. Steelclaw's expression softened slightly. The young ones shame us with their wisdom. He turned to his warriors. We leave, but we will watch. If humans return to this place, there will be consequences. The Dracnir took flight. Foster glared at Rachel. You just cost us billions. You chose them over your own kind. I chose peace, Rachel said. There is a difference. Foster and his group left, but Rachel could see the anger in their eyes. She had made enemies today, powerful ones. The next week was chaos. Rachel worked with Diana and Governor Wells to review every survey map the colony had, looking for other deposits, other options. The Dracnir sent a representative, a younger warrior named Riverstone, to help identify lands that were not sacred or claimed. They found a deposit, smaller than the burial ground site, but substantial. It would require more work to extract, but it was possible. And more importantly, the Dracnir agreed to allow mining there in exchange for human help building a water purification system for the lower settlements. It was not perfect. Some colonists, including Foster, were furious. They said Rachel had given away too much, that she had let the Dracnir dictate terms. But most people saw it differently. They saw a future where both species could survive together. Ashwing came to Rachel's dwelling 3 weeks after the confrontation. The elder did not apologize, but she did say, "You stood between angry warriors to protect both sides. That took courage. You are welcome in the settlement again." That night, Rachel sat with her cubs on the roof of her dwelling, watching the stars. The cubs were discussing their future. Cinder wanted to be a warrior. Flint was interested in building. Obsidian talked about being a mediator between species. Ruby, still the smallest, said she wanted to teach young ones to fly. They were growing up, becoming their own people, and Rachel realized that the scared, broken woman who had woken up in a medical bay 9 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had found family in the strangest place, someone who belonged to 2 worlds and fit perfectly in neither, but had made that space her home anyway. The ship from Earth arrived without warning on a cold morning 1 year after the burial ground crisis. It was bigger than any supply ship, bristling with corporate logos. Dyson Mining Consortium, one of the largest resource extraction companies in human space. Rachel was helping Flint repair a section of the settlement wall when the landing alert sounded. The cubs, now fully grown and magnificent, stopped their work immediately. They had learned to be wary of unexpected ships. The corporate representative was a woman named Lauren Ashford. She wore an expensive suit that was completely impractical for a frontier colony. She smiled with perfect white teeth and dead eyes. "We are here to help," Ashford announced in the colony meeting hall. Half the colonists had gathered, along with several Dracnir including Ashwing and Steelclaw. Rachel stood at the back with her cubs. "Dyson Consortium is prepared to purchase this colony," Ashford continued. "We will pay off all debts to Earth. We will provide equipment, supplies, everything you need. In return, we want full mining rights to all deposits on this planet, including renegotiating treaties with local wildlife," Ashford added, looking directly at the Dracnir. The room went silent. Steelclaw's growl was low and dangerous. Ashwing's eyes had gone cold. "We are not wildlife," Steelclaw said quietly. "We are people." Ashford's smile never wavered. "Of course, a figure of speech, but surely you understand the current arrangements are not economically viable. Dyson can make this planet profitable for everyone." Governor Wells, looking older than Rachel had ever seen him, spoke carefully. "And if we refuse your offer?" "Then Earth will withdraw all support within 60 days, Ashford said. "You will be on your own. Good luck surviving without supply ships." She let that sink in. "We will give you 48 hours to decide. I am confident you will make the right choice." After she left, chaos erupted. Foster and his supporters, now almost a third of the colony, immediately pushed for accepting. "This is our chance," Foster argued. "Real support, real resources. We will not have to beg scraps from dragon people anymore." Others were less certain. Diana stood and pointed out that Dyson would bring their own workers, their own rules. "We will not be a colony anymore. We will be employees, and the Draknir will be in the way of profit." Ashwing rose to her full height. "We will not negotiate with those who see us as obstacles to be removed." The meeting dissolved into shouting. Rachel slipped out with her cubs, her head spinning. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. That night an emergency joint council was called. Human and Draknir together, something that had never happened before. Ashford attended, looking annoyed at having to sit with wildlife. Rachel sat quietly, her cubs around her, until Diana stood and said, "There might be another option." Diana pulled up data on a portable screen. The Outer Colonies Act of 2187 allows colonies that achieve sustainable independence and demonstrate functioning multi-species governance to apply for autonomous status. We would not be under Earth's direct control anymore. "But you are not sustainable," Ashford said. "You barely survive year to year." "We were not sustainable," Diana corrected. "But look at these numbers. Since we started working together with the Draknir, our efficiency has increased 40%. The Joint Water Project saves both our people's resources. The shared patrols have reduced accidents in the mining zones. We are stronger together." Ashwing studied the data. "You propose formal alliance, humans and Draknir as one colony." "Yes," Diana said. "Equal partners, shared governance, independence from Earth's corporate interests." Ashford laughed. "You cannot be serious. Earth will never recognize that." "Actually, they will have to," Diana said. "If we meet the legal requirements and file the paperwork, it is in the law." The debate lasted hours. Some humans loved the idea. Others, like Foster, called it treason. Some Draknir saw potential. Others saw danger in binding their future to humans. Finally, Ashwing called for silence. "This is not a decision for elders alone. All must choose." The vote happened the next day. Every adult human in Draknir cast their decision. Rachel voted yes, her hand shaking as she pressed the button. Her cubs were not old enough to vote, but they stood with her, solid and supportive. The results came in slowly. It was close, terrifyingly close. Some Draknir voted no, fearing loss of tradition. Some humans voted no, wanting Earth's protection. But when the final count displayed, independence won, 52% in favor. Foster and his supporters were furious. 37 humans chose to leave on Ashford's ship, unable to accept the new order. Foster stood in the departing shuttle's doorway and looked at Rachel one last time. "You have doomed us all," he said. Rachel met his eyes. "No, I think we just saved ourselves." The shuttle lifted off. Ashford's ship departed hours later, taking the dissenters back to Earth. The colony, smaller now, watched them go. The first year of independence was hard. Earth cut all support as promised. The colony had to rely entirely on what they could produce and what the Draknir could provide. There were food shortages, equipment failures, moments when Rachel wondered if Foster had been right. But slowly, things improved. A trade ship from another independent colony arrived, drawn by stories of the Human-Dracnir alliance. Then another. More species came, curious about this strange place where different peoples worked together. 5 years passed. Rachel was 40 now. Her cubs had cubs of their own. Cinder had become a respected warrior and trainer. Flint worked in construction, building the new sections of the growing settlement. Obsidian served as a mediator in disputes, his wisdom valued by both species. Ruby taught young ones to fly, both Dracnir and the few humans brave enough to try with mechanical wings. And Ruby's daughter, a small fierce thing with scales that shimmered pink and gold, had chosen a human teenager named Sam as her clutch mother. The cycle continued. Rachel sat on the ceremonial cliff, the same place she had jumped all those years ago. Diana joined her, now the elected leader of the colony, not governor, just leader, chosen by both humans and Dracnir. "Think you made the right choice?" Diana asked. Rachel looked down at the valley. The settlement had grown huge, a mix of human and Dracnir architecture. Children of both species played together in the streets. The barriers between peoples were fading, slowly but surely. "I did not make a choice," Rachel said. "4 scared orphans made it for me when they crawled into my hospital bed. I just had the sense to listen." Movement below caught her eye. Cinder was teaching a group of young ones to hunt. Flint was explaining structural engineering to a mixed class of humans and Dracnir. Obsidian was mediating a discussion between farmers about water rights. Ruby flew overhead with her daughter and Sam, the human girl laughing as she clung to Ruby's back. Rachel's dwelling was massive now, expanded over the years. All 4 of her grown cubs still lived close by, their families intermingled with hers. She was grandmother to 7 dragon young and honorary aunt to a dozen human children. That night, Ruby visited as she did every evening. She was the last to check on Rachel, as she had been since she was small. "Rest well, mother," Ruby said in the Dracnir language Rachel now spoke as easily as English. "Rest well, little flame," Rachel responded, using the nickname Ruby pretended to hate. Alone, Rachel looked at an old photo from Earth. Her brother and sister lost so long ago in that transport accident. The pain was still there, but softer now, healed around the edges. "I hope you found peace," Rachel whispered to their images. "I finally did, in the last place I expected, with the last family I imagined." She set the photo down and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow, another colony wanted to learn their model of cooperation. Tomorrow, there was a water rights dispute to solve. Tomorrow, Cinder's eldest wanted to learn human mathematics to better understand engineering. But tonight, Rachel Winters slept peacefully. She had come to this planet broken and alone, seeking to escape memories. Instead, she had found 4 orphans who needed her, and in saving them, they had saved her right back. She closed her eyes. Outside, the 2 moons rose over a settlement that belonged to no single species, but to all of them. A home built on the simple idea that family was not about biology or tradition or species. It was about who you chose to stand with, who you chose to protect, who you chose to love, even when it made no sense at all. Rachel smiled in her sleep. Her cubs had taught her that, and she would spend the rest of her life teaching others the same lesson, one heart choosing at a time.